so welcome to another beautiful episode of our podcast. My name's Helen Tuvey, I'm editor of Family Tree. With me, as usual, is my normal accomplice,
Nathan Ward, hello there.
and we have our very special guest back, Karen Evans. So regular readers of Family Tree will know that Karen is all about DNA. She does it like before breakfast, after breakfast, etc., etc. But in the course of doing family history over, going to spare your blushes, Karen, over several decades, it's safe to say, isn't it?
Yes, it is so
Yeah,
decade.
over several decades of family history, you have been using Ancestry since since the internet came along, and so Ancestry is a key bit of how many of us do our family history research. It's hard to get to an archive, and Ancestry has billions of records, doesn't it? And fantastic tree building tools, and we all pay a lot of money every single month or every year, depending on how we pay for it. But the big question is, are we getting the most from our money? And I think you're going to help us get more out of it, aren't you?
Yeah, hopefully. I think I was just been saying to Nathan that sometimes you forget what you actually learn over all these years, all these many decades, thank you, Helen, all these many decades of using a site. And actually, when you talk to other people who don't use it very often or haven't used it, and you go, oh, you could do this, they go, oh, I didn't realize that. And oh, gosh, that would have saved me hours and hours and hours. And little tips and tricks maybe to speed up the process when you're trying to search for something, or really things that might make sense to use, or little ways of getting around things or finding things would be beneficial for everyone, isn't it, really?
Mm. So we're talking to Karen in particular because she's going to do a fantastic masterclass for us, and it's going to be happening in July 2025 over 3 evenings, going in depth to try and get us up to speed and making sure that we're kind of searching a bit more thoroughly, that we're using all the tree building tools. It's not going to be DNA focused, it's literally on those hardcore family history skills that we need. So Karen, over the course of using Ancestry and over the course of chatting to other family historians, are there things that you feel that kind of crop up quite often, or that you've found that you're really grateful to have learned?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of different areas. There's actually using it effectively in terms of knowing what's already on there and being able to find it. And then also the idea of like tips and tricks on when you how to find the information by putting the right kind of information in the first place. And then I think a biggie is the tree building facility, which is absolutely wonderful on Ancestry, because obviously it's not only giving you the opportunity to build your tree, but giving you hints and clues on what may come next in your tree. And then also linking that with the possible records that are already on there. But also because obviously the DNA of linking it to the DNA and all the sort of hints that you get there. And I do find a lot of people like to use the tree. I mean, it's a really popular thing. We all know that, you go on and there's a proliferate, a lot. I'm going to say lots, a lot of trees. But we also see how many mistakes are made on trees, whether you're using the DNA trees or not. You see all of many, many little foibles with the trees, let's put it like that, and how easy perhaps they could be avoided if people knew either how to build the tree in the first place, or how to get rid of those mistakes. And I'm not saying I don't, because I've made mistakes when I've looked at my tree, and sometimes it's almost like people have got the mistakes, they can see them, and they don't know how to rectify them as well. So it's a case of looking at the trees and making sure that they are accurate and they are built properly and they use the hints correctly. And then really drilling down on the resources that Ancestry has, but also how they are going to help you, but also how you can get drawn, if you like, into the wrong path. It's quite easy with Ancestry, particularly when you first start, or and I've done it too. It's not when first start. That sounds awfully demeaning, because I've done it in later years. That you can easily get drawn in a wrong way with results and with hints to sort of draw you, and it's quite easy to get caught in and start building your tree wrong. And then obviously, if you do that, other people do that, and before you know it, you've got a whole forest of trees with incorrect information, which then someone new will just walk in and go straight into that. So I think that's really important. And
I
as I
love the
say,
idea that that you're gonna help us actually sort out problems in our trees because you're all gonna hold our hands up. Probably there's gonna be none of us who hasn't got a mistake of some kind or other. So Nathan, you're fairly newish to building your tree on Ancestry. Are there things which you found frustrating or things that you found good? And you probably actually have got tips that you can share with all of us because you've got a really fresh pair of eyes on the subject.
I don't know about frustrating. I think for me, I probably just don't get enough out of what Ancestry offers. I've come in and I sort of go down a very specific path every time I log in. So it's go to my tree, click on my tree, click on a person, click on profile, click on hints, and that's about it. So I'm not really navigating the whole site properly.
right, okay, yeah, and to be honest, I think that's a lot of us. Even now, if I go onto my tree and I see it says hint, I'll go and have a look, and then 3 hours later, I may have followed a very interesting or not so interesting path down that particular hint. Sometimes the hints are really useful because they do signpost you to a source that you haven't thought about.
Mm.
So they can be super helpful. But equally, yeah, they kind of channel you down in one particular way. And I read somewhere that if you are working on a particular part of your tree, Ancestry picks up on that and then gives you more hints. So if, for instance, you open it on, say, your great-great-grandmother, and then you click away, then it will give you hints to the person she married, which may not have been there before. So it's kind of, I presume it's AIing, I don't know, AIing and, oh, you seem to be interested in that part of your tree. So if, for instance, I've got a bit of my tree that I find difficult, I keep going over to that bit of the tree, hoping it will give me hints that are going, do you know, there's this sort of, you thought about this? And it doesn't really, unfortunately. No, that it has occasionally. So actually it is useful, but I appreciate that it's not the most constructive way of using Ancestry or building your tree. But it's kind of, it's a way a lot of us do. And what I have noticed from the podcast is Helen's always encouraging people, and I'm really bad at this, at having some kind of strategy and having a formulated plan and trying not to deviate from that so that you are clear. And I think the hints kind of are like a little bit like some kind of witch with a little sweet going, come down my path instead. You don't want to don't go on the path of goodness, go on my naughty path of badness into this forest of strangeness. So yeah, I think it is. I think with Ancestry, it's almost before you even open it, it's having a formulated plan of where do I want to find out about, what resources am I going to look for, and kind of trying to stay funneled in on that as much as you possibly can. And then understanding what that resource is and what it's going to give you and also what it's not going to give you. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I feel like a rabbit in the headlights when I log into Ancestry. I've spent my money. I want to get the most from it. So I'm like frantically, what can it throw at me? What can I get? What can I grab? So again, me and Helen talk about hints all the time, but it's my quickest route to trying to build my tree up. Whereas it might not be actually the information I'm really wanting to find.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I would say, and perhaps, and that's a really good point because it's something I wouldn't consider as a constant user, is that there are sites that give some of the things that Ancestry give that are free. So I don't spend my time looking at the things on Ancestry that I can get somewhere else for free. I look at what Ancestry have got that is unique to them or gives me another angle on that particular resource. Sometimes it's quick, but if I'm thinking I've got a limited amount of time, so I'm only going to pay for X amount of months, then obviously I'm going to think, okay, what can I only get on Ancestry and use? And I've kind of got the main details of what I need, and then looking at those other sources as well. But obviously that's okay for me because I'm saying, oh, well, you could do that on these sites. But if you don't know where those sites are for free, then that's not really going to help you because then you're going to spend all the time looking for sites which may or may not have the information for free. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting, something I need to consider maybe in the talk is making sure that I'm pointing out where other information might be so that we can use our Ancestry time constructively.
I mean, there are lots of free resources, aren't there? And Nathan, when you started out, we kept trying to explore all the free resources, but it didn't take long before you were starting to feel a bit frustrated. And the only way you were going to get the information you needed, within the constraints of like working full time, so it's hard to get to an archive and having a family, all those sort of other things which eat up our time in a good way, but they eat up our time. So online research is what most of us have to do most of the time, and paying it was just the only option, wasn't it, Nathan? It felt like that to us.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like say time, it's making the most effective uses of your time and making sure that, well, for me at the moment, Ancestry is working as efficiently as possible
Yeah.
the time that I've got.
Yeah. I think we're back then really to what Helen was saying about having that process and a sort of you say you've got 2 hours and you go, okay, for these 2 hours I'm going to look at this particular line and focus on that particular line. And really then it's drilling down on what you're hoping to find, because obviously there's going to be the censuses and there's going to be the birth, marriage and death records, but then what other things may come up either in the hints or then through searching through the catalogues in those particular areas. And it all then depends on how well your particular area has been sort of researched on Ancestry in terms of what documentation they've got compared to other sites or free sites. So yeah, then you're in the lap of the Ancestry gods on whether they've decided to, have your particular county with the records or not. But obviously they're getting more and more all the time. So, there's a good chance that yours are going to be on there, or at least part of your tree is going to be on there.
So, Karen, when you're searching on Ancestry, because you said about finding out what they've digitized for your particular kind of geographical area of interest, or might be subject area, so if it's a military question or whatever, then do you just go to the main Ancestry search, or do you search Ancestry in other ways?
Yeah, so there's a combination. Obviously, I do the main Ancestry search, but I also go through the catalogue. So I open the catalogue, in the drop-down menu where it's in the different areas. So I'll go to the catalogue and then I'll put in keywords that I find that are going to be useful. And I've found over time there are certain keywords that work and certain keywords that don't. So you think, oh, I'll put in military, but actually then you're going to end up having a whole host of ones from all different countries, and then you're overwhelmed. So it's kind of, I think Ancestry do actually kind of encourage you to use certain keywords, and it's looking at things on Ancestry. For instance, I use, if I'm using a new area of interest, for instance, such as military, because I don't use military very often. My family aren't military, or we have very little, interestingly. So it's something I even now have to really think about what I'm going to do. So I often watch like Ancestry related videos that the Ancestry themselves put on finding those records. So I use my sort of tips on which words I'm going to use, my keywords, but I also then check their little videos on researching, almost as an aid memoir, and going, okay, because they often give you little tips on how to find things, to what keywords to use, which I can then put in and again save myself some time rather than guessing what I'm going to do. And then often, because I'm on Ancestry such a lot, I look at what's new. I look at this, so I can split it down and look at what's new in the area, just in case something that I didn't know has then dropped on Ancestry, because they're always having new or updated records, and then I can see it from there as well. So that's my sort of way of trying to find out if there's a particular record set that I might be interested in. So for instance, I mean, often off the beaten track ones, as you say, are the military ones. Obviously, there's to do with crime and punishment, and obviously the sort of the educational ones and the job ones are always ones that I'm constantly going back and looking to see if they've been updated, because I quite like those as ways of filling out the lives of those particular ancestors once I've got them pinned down on a tree as people, through the sort of their normal documentation. Then it's those extra ones that are really going to make these people sing, if you like, that I'm looking for.
Definitely. We're big fans of trying to find out more about their lives, aren't we, Nathan?
Unfortunately, yes.
Well, unfortunately, because you feel like you stay with the same ancestors for a long time.
Well, yeah, I've said it before. I wasn't planning on getting so involved in all this. It was going to be dates and numbers and figures, and now I'm just totally lost. It's like I've just recently, yesterday, I found out that one of my relatives was a bridge painter, and now I'm like, oh, which bridges did he paint? I visit them, and it's like, oh my God, this wasn't part of my plan, but I'm hooked.
Oh, that's brilliant though. That's great. Oh, yeah. I think that's the thing though. I think it is lovely to have the names and the dates. But I've found, interestingly, the people that get to know, they're all dead. Why I feel I've got to know them. But you kind of do feel like you get to know them when you have all that added detail. You can imagine them or have some kind of imagined life for them. I'm sure it's all very romanticized. But they become people. They like they're there on your tree and you see their names and it's like, I know you because of your job and where you went to school and maybe other bits of information I found of maybe that you were included in a will or just something like that. I think that's some of the best bits. Yeah, it's exciting getting another little bit of your twig, but sometimes the best bit is finding something, like you said, like a bridge painter. And you're right. I mean, it's like, obviously mine's very industrial and it's like, oh, they worked as a glass flattener. And instantly it's like, I wonder where they worked in a glass flattener. Let's go and look at a map. Where is the closest glass fattening factory to where they worked? Did they all work there? I wonder if there was an accident. Let me look in the newspaper. Did they have lots of accidents for glass flatteners? And before you know it. So I absolutely agree. That is fantastic. It's so much fun.
Yeah, I'm not going to deter either of you. I definitely agree that's where the fun lies. This is getting really off topic, but I got a will which came through just yesterday, or the day before. And in there was somebody who had died in the 1960s, a woman, and she'd left her silver bracelet to one of her friends, and she had left something to another friend, and she said, to my friend, blah, blah. And then one of the witnesses on the will was a woman called Mrs. So-and-so, and it went homeowner. And this woman who died was a homeowner as well. So the woman who died was a railway clerk. So that's not like super salubrious. And she'd bought this house in the 30s. So I was like, go girls. Like, we had evidence of these two old ladies who were both homeowners. And I think it was only 1969 when women could start to get a mortgage. They weren't affluent people. They were working like a good quality job being a railway clerk. They weren't having a super tough time. They weren't being like a laundress or, doing really hard manual labour. But, they were working people. But they'd managed to both be homeowners. Like, I just imagine them. Like, did they power each other on to be so financially astute through decades that it wasn't easy for women to be like that? I was like, this is amazing little insight. They're not even my direct ancestors. You don't need to ask. They're just but it was just a real little social history, and it's like to a very distant.
Were you going down a rabbit hole by any chance there?
Yes.
Yeah, yay.
Anyway, back on topic. We're talking about ancestry, but the reason we want to get good at ancestry is because we want to piece together these stories. We want to make sure we haven't got unnecessary brick walls, and we want to make sure that we are getting the most from our money every single month or year, when we do our subscription to them. So it does just save us time, doesn't it, if we know where to look, how to sort out a problem when we get a problem. And this is what you're going to be teaching us, aren't you, Karen, on your course?
Yeah, because I think we've, as I say, over time, I've learnt little tips and tricks on how to it's the searching's really useful. I think sometimes less is more in the search because you can actually put very specific things in a search. And Ancestry can be very specific in its results then. So I find, for instance, that if you put a name of someone and you put a birth year, it will actually then default to the birth year. Even it almost sees certain things as more important than others. So it will go, oh, well, that's the birth year, and that seems to be more important than the place where they were born. And you think, okay, so I'm not quite sure where this person was born. So if I put a place of birth, this might really throw my sources and throw what my sort of research is going to show. So it's a case of working out what's the best way of searching with the best information. And also, obviously, as we all know, with surnames and things, because I think one of the things I think is really interesting, and people still do it, is it's like, well, I'm sort of a Philip and you're a Phillips, but because you've not got an S and I have, we can't be the same family, or my surname's spelled like Shepherd and we've got an H and it's things like that. And then people are like, oh, well, we can't be. And obviously names are so fluid, and on Ancestry and on the records, they are so fluid that trying to then explain to people that just putting a surname is sometimes really not the best way of doing it, just leaving it as a cold, hard surname. And you see someone else with the same person, but without the H for Shep, and you go, that can't be mine because, they haven't got the right lettering. So it is that case of almost playing a game of what's going to give me the best results with the information that I put into Ancestry. And I found literally by changing the year of birth or by changing where someone lives, I'll get different results. And you think, well, which results then am I missing? And one of the things I find is, I'm going off on a tangent a bit, a lot of my family are from Dudley, which is in Worcestershire. But was in Staffordshire for a very, very short period of time. However, Ancestry insists on counting any records of Dudley in Staffordshire. So if I put Dudley, it defaults to Dudley, Staffordshire, then it then brings out all of the results. So if someone was born in Dudley, but they can't find them in Dudley, it will then give me all the results of anyone of that person's name from Staffordshire, not Worcestershire. And actually the Worcestershire ones are the ones that I'm looking for because it's Worcestershire and it's really close. So they'll end up going to somewhere like Stoke-on-Trent rather than a place just down the road like in Halesowen, for instance, which is much more likely them than the people an hour's drive away in Staffordshire. But it's saying, oh, Dudley, Staffordshire. Therefore, let's look at Staffordshire. Let's ignore the Worcestershire records, which are actually the ones I need. So when I do a search, for instance, and I'm looking for someone I know is born in Dudley, I never put place of birth, Dudley, in the spot. I have to put it in the keywords, so it will come up as Dudley.
Handy.
There you go. And that's what I'm saying, these little things. And obviously that's very specific, but there's these foibles and the idea, what I find really frustrating, I talk to an Ancestry person at who do you think you are or something, and saying about when they have the initial letter of the name, but it still throws it in, even though I've put direct search and it's like Sarah something, and it's like, I know she never had Sarah Ann or Sarah Jane, and he'll actually throw those J's and A's in. It's like, no, let me search for just Sarah, things like that. So you do have to play a game with it sometimes on best use. And obviously, not putting in full names so I've got a surname Timbrell where there's a lot of spelling deviations, and instead of putting the letters, obviously putting in the little asterisks so that you've got all of those little clues on what can come in instead. That can really help, particularly when people have indexed the things like the census, and obviously the record, the transcription isn't quite correct, so which we can all find because sometimes those Victorian writing scripts are quite difficult to read. So it's things like that. Look, I'm off on a tangent already, but yeah, so it is about trying to get people to say, why can't I find someone? Were they not there? Were they not in the census all those years? And like, well, no, here's some of the, because this letter always gets transcribed as that letter, or sometimes you have to sort of pretend that they couldn't spell it. How would you say it phonetically sometimes? Either. So
who's your course aimed at, Karen? Is it somebody who's a beginner? Like, do you think it would help Nathan, who's kind of a beginner, but not, you're stopping being a beginner, really, aren't you?
Oh, I don't know about that. Definitely still a beginner.
Okay. Would it help somebody who's done a few months of family history or a few years or both? What do you reckon?
I think it would be mostly useful for people either who've just stepped into the world of Ancestry or have been using it for a little bit and perhaps are getting a bit more confident and want some of the tips and tricks. But I suppose it could be useful for people who've been using it for a while and maybe say, have you considered using it in line with other record sets that are not Ancestry based to kind of build a larger picture of your ancestor? So I'm a little monkey, for instance, for finding someone on a census and then going onto Google Maps and walking down the Google Maps street looking to see if the houses that are there on Google Maps could possibly be the same houses they lived in. Are they still the same Victorian houses? And or looking is it the Leicestershire site which has all of the Kelly's directories?
Yes.
See if I can find them on the Kelly's directory. So it's that kind of like mashing things together, using the information in the best way of like, building them out a little bit. So yeah, either really, I suppose.
And will the course cover things like you said that it's going to cover correcting mistakes in our trees, but will it cover attaching sources and how to deal with the hints? Like, when sometimes you accept the hints, sometimes you don't, and trying to work
Yeah. I think the hints one is really important because I think if we can stop people at source, if we can stop people just adding a hint because it isn't actually using interrogation, I think would be really useful. Yeah, and explaining why. I think it's really interesting because often I do a lot of tree building because of quick and dirty trees with DNA. And I do use the hints quite a lot because that obviously will save me. But I always interrogate, even though I'm doing a quick and dirty tree for someone else's tree, I always interrogate, is that really the only option for that person to be that relation to based on that? And the number of times that it isn't based on someone's tree that's already incorrect somewhere else on Ancestry. So definitely interrogation of the information and the hints, because hints are super useful and wonderful. I mean, it makes Ancestry so helpful, but it can really lead you down the garden path. And I think it is important. I'm, if I hold my hands up, I'm very naughty about adding source information sometimes, which has then wasted time for me because I've then looked back 3 or 4 or 5 or maybe more years later and thinking, where did I get that from? And really, I think that's because I started. No, there's no excuse. That's pathetic. I haven't got an excuse. I started in my mad youth, loved just collecting lots of information, and now it's too late. I am crushed and must every so often go back and look at sources and find them again. So if you can get into the habit early on, I think that's really, really good practice.
Have you considered doing a research log maybe?
Anyway, so yes, I have. Yeah, you see, I've said see, obviously I started, thank you, Helen, like anything being online and having to go to records offices. And I used to have all the stuff. It was this laptops and having a piece of paper for each of my ancestors with their name and where they came from and writing down and spending all day at a records office and being really pleased if I found one record in like 8 hours. And I was really pleased. It was really exciting. Um, and but even then I would bop around because if I found that one record, I'd be so excited. I'd then like try and work out. You'd be like, right, this is a clue onto which church I should be looking at. Let's look at the rest of the church to see if I can find anyone else with that name and see if they link. And then before I know it, it was like, oh no, it's home time. But I wouldn't have written down where I'd been because I hadn't got a research log. So yes, they are super useful, and I should have written it on a piece of paper, and I occasionally did. But then I've got a butterfly brain and I don't. And now, after all these decades, it looks like a daunting task of hell.
I think it's a tricky era. I think actually Nathan's really fortunate because the people who did research solely before the internet, as you say, the progress was so slow and it was all paper based. So you just, without meaning to, as long as you bunged it in a ring binder or a box or something, you were going to have your paper trail of what you did next. And it could even be writing letters to go and get a copy of the census from somebody. It's that painstaking and slow. And then suddenly along came the internet smash and grab, and none of us realised how much we were going to discover. Because at the start, even with the internet, there weren't all the censuses. Nathan, back in the day, we had to wait for the censuses one by one.
I did. The time then the 1911 came out, it was a party.
Yes. And when 1901 came out, I started work on Family Tree and on its sister publication called Practical Family History, and we broke the website. There were so many family historians searching on it, it just fell over. Yeah. And it didn't, I think it fell over for about a year. It was badly damaged by overuse. So it was just a different world, and we didn't realise that we were going to be finding out so much, and we wouldn't remember it, and we wouldn't have any printouts. So we veered off into the digital distance, and then after like 10 years, realised we hadn't written it.
Oh, yeah, but I have learned, the good thing is, you see, I have learned, you're right, the fact you thought you'll never forget this because it took you like 3 months to find it, so there's no way you're going to forget where it is. But I have learned now, because with the DNA, where I thought, oh, I'll never forget where the matches are, but of course you do. But foresight now, it was like, no, think of how am I going to record how I found where that DNA person is? How am I going to put them on the tree? How am I going to mark who they are? How am I going to mark who they're related? So now, I feel I have redeemed myself in DNA world in terms of where I'm going and how I record it. And if only I could go back and do that with my tree, I'd be a very happy person. So yeah, you learn, but you're right. Nathan is so lucky. Oh,
I've got a great teacher.
you have. She's wonderful.
I don't know who she is, but I think, Karen, I think we're going to be in really good hands with you with the course, because you know what it actually like to be a family historian, searching high and low, log into the night, looking for ancestors, and sometimes the pieces all fall together quite easily, and sometimes they don't. And you're going to be here to help us find our way around the records, think of ways to search smarter, work out how to solve those problems on our tree, even if they're problems that we've accidentally added in. We can unpick those erroneous bits and then put it straight again and continue, and look kind of judiciously at the records and be careful how we use the hints. So I think we're going to have fun in July. And I think you're going to have fun, Lee. And I think you might be pleased what you know, and you'll definitely find it useful what you don't know.
Definitely, I'm definitely coming to these.
Yeah.
I think Nathan's probably knows far more than he thinks he does. From what you were saying, the fact that you've been able to find out about that ancestor and their job, it shows you're sort of beginning to interrogate information and thinking about where you can go from it. I think that's showing good, excellent family history skills there.
Yeah, I just clicked on the hint, and it's on the 1911 census.
Yes, but you were moving from it. That's the point. You're going, oh, I wonder how that means and what that means, and yeah, checking stuff.
Oh, thank you then, you guys. If anybody would like to sign up for Karen's course, you just need to head over to the Family Tree website, and it's www.family-tree.co.uk. You can go to the webinars section and look for Karen. So Karen's name is Karen Evans, and her masterclass is starting on the 1st of July, and it's 3 evenings, so the 1st, the 8th and the 15th of July. And over those 3 evenings, Karen will be taking us on a tour around Ancestry, helping us search smarter and build better trees and solve problems. So that'll be great. And we'll see you there.